Hey there, I'm Ken. This is Canadian Retro Things. Welcome. Today, I'm going to look at my Atari 800. If you remember a few months ago, I did a video about going to VCF Midwest in Chicago. That was back in September. One of the things I picked up while I was at VCF Midwest was an Atari 800 computer. I have not yet actually played around with that, so today I am going to play around with that Atari 800. Now, this is the oldest Atari computer that I have played around with. I do have an XEGS, and that was the very first Atari computer I ever got to play around with. And this one's a little bit older and a little bit different from that, so yeah, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to first take it apart and take a look at the inside of it. It is supposed to be working, so I'm not going to go too much into depth in looking over the boards and stuff. I'm just going to open it up to give it a bit of a cleaning. And once that's done, I'm going to plug it in and try it out. But before I do that, I have to give a shout out and a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay is the home of the $5 for 10 PCBs deal. But did you know that they offer more than just standard PCBs? They also offer high-density interconnect PCBs, also known as HDI PCBs. So you can shrink that project down if you need to. There are also flex PCBs as well as rigid flex PCBs for when your project is likely to flex or warp, or you just need to bend that PCB to make it fit. So no matter what you're designing a PCB for, PCBWay has what you need to bring your project to life. And this is my Atari 800. This was released in 1979 and is the big brother to the Atari 400. A couple notable differences is that the Atari 400 had a membrane keyboard. So this one has a full keyboard. The membrane keyboard was meant for a younger audience in case they spilt something on it. The other thing about the Atari 400 is it had only one cartridge slot, whereas the Atari 800 has both a left and a right cartridge. However, I think there was only ever one cartridge released for the right side, so that didn't exactly work out how Atari had planned, but some other things about this. On the end of the computer here, we have a monitor output. This is the peripheral plug-in for disk drives, tape drives, etc. Your channel selector for channels 2 or 3 on this one, and your power switch on and off, and your power in. On the back, there is nothing but a coaxial cable. On this side, there's nothing, and on the front, you've got 4 joystick ports. So you could conceivably have up to 8 paddles plugged into this at once. Now, if you look under the cartridge port here, there are a couple of screws here, here, and here. When you take the screws out, you can then lift the entire back off, and you can see there is 4 expansion ports there. Now, there are some models of this where this top part just clips into place. And if you look at these expansions, they are 16K expansion boards here. So there is 1, 2, 3. And 4. Oh, and this one, not a 16K expansion board, I don't think. And I just went and looked it up, and this board that goes in the front slot closest to the keyboard here is actually a 10 kilobyte ROM card. So these are RAM expansion cards, the other 3 are RAM expansion cards, and this one is a ROM card. See, this is the very first Atari 800 I've ever owned. Actually, it's one of the very few Ataris I've ever actually used. I have an XEGS, and that's the only other Atari computer I've ever used. So, this is a complete learning experience for me. One of the interesting things is, man, these computers are heavy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to jump over right now to taking a look at weighing this thing, just to see how much it is compared to a similar computer of its time. How much does the Atari 800 weigh? Well, I'm going to compare it to my completely stock TRS-80 Color Computer 1, which is the closest in age computer that I have to the Atari 800. The Color Computer 1 weighs 3.14 kilograms. Now, let's take a look at the Atari. And the Atari comes to 4.198 kilograms. But wait, the Color Computer 1 has a built-in power supply. So, I guess we're going to have to add the Atari's power supply onto this, and honestly, that's not a very big power supply for some of them that I've seen. I know my Atari XEGS has a much larger power supply than this, and that brings our weight up to 5.07 kilograms. What does that mean? Well, it means absolutely nothing, except that I guess if you're going to drop one of these retro computers on your foot, try to make it a Coco 1, because you're going to do a lot more damage with an Atari 800. So, let's pop the top off this and take a look at what's inside. I have the screws out, and I have the top of the back of the case here loosened up, I think enough to get it off. There we go. So, just looking at the bottom, you can see there's a speaker here. More shielding. I'm not sure how deep I'm going to go into taking this apart because, honestly, there's actually nothing wrong with it right now. I do believe it is working just fine. I had plugged it in and everything seemed good. But let's take a few more screws off and see if we can get some of it apart. So this would be the keyboard ribbon cable. There we go. Alright, well, there we have the keyboard. Whew, dusty and dirty. Well, I think I'm going to give this a little bit of a cleaning while I've got it open. So as you can see, there is a very substantial aluminum RF shield here. So this is as far as I'll take it apart right now, but as you can see, this would be the power board, as it is labeled as the power board. And then this underneath, if I took this all off, would be the main computer. But as I said, I'm just going to give it a cleaning and then put it back together, and then we can play with it. And here is my Atari 800 ready to go. One of the interesting things about the Atari 800 and the 400, I'm not sure if it's like this for any of the other Atari computers, but these ones do not have a basic language built into them. As you can see, it comes up as a memo pad, and you can try to write a program on it. But it does nothing because you're really just taking notes here. What you do need is this. This is the basic language on a cartridge. So it's not like this for any of the other computers that I own. This is the only one I actually currently own that needs a cartridge for the basic language. And that ready prompt means that you are actually in BASIC now, Atari BASIC. One thing I do have to say is that the keyboard is rather nice to type on. And there we go, we have a little program written. So let's run it. So playing around with BASIC is fun and everything. But what about the games? Well, obviously, you can have cartridge games. And it's a computer, so you can have discs or tapes. I currently have a disk drive emulator here, which I will use. So I will plug this in to the computer, and then we'll take a look at one of my favorite games playing. Now, I have used this before in a video with my Atari XEGS, and so it brings up a list of the different files that you have on the SD card, and you go through using the arrows or the joystick. So we're going to try Gateway to AppSci. So you bring it up, you put it into drive 1, and then you reset the computer. And one thing I just realized that I forgot to do is the fact that you have to take the BASIC cartridge out to make a lot of the disc games work. So BASIC cartridge out. There we go. And I am going to be using one of my many Atari 2600 controllers that I have. So one thing about this game, I've played it on the Commodore and the ColecoVision. So far, the ColecoVision's my favorite. Haven't really played it on the Atari 800. Just played it enough to figure out that, oddly enough, they use the Option, Select, and Start keys for choosing what you're going to do. So your Select key goes through your keys, locate, trap, search palettes, like all of the actions that you can do. Your Start key is your fight, gets you in your fight mode. Then if you've picked something up, hit the Option key to bring it up, and then fire, and that equips it. There we go. So, wow. So far, the way that I've played it is that I would say the Commodore version is the easiest. ColecoVision next, and the hardest one so far has been the Atari one. Well, there we go. That was my Atari 800 computer, which is actually the oldest computer that I currently own. But that was just a quick look at it, and I do have some other things, because if you remember that video I did about VCF Midwest, I picked up a few things for this besides the computer, like a disk drive and a tape drive. I unfortunately don't currently have any discs or tapes for it, so can't try that out yet. But hopefully in the future I will get a hold of some of those. I will be on the lookout. I at least have the disk drive emulator that goes with it, and that works great, so I can play a lot of the games that I'm really looking forward to trying on it, the ones that I've heard are really popular. I'm even looking forward to maybe finding some hidden gems. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget that a like, a subscribe, a comment are all things that are greatly appreciated. Well, since this Atari 800's hooked up, I think I'm going to go play more games, and I will see you next time.